Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we had that whole opening with young Neil. And so I love that it's like because of everything that happened with Scott, it made him go like, wow, I could die at any moment. And, I only just recently discovered I'm a cinephile, so I'm going to get started on writing a movie. He's writing a screenplay and having no success. It kind of reminds me of that report that SpongeBob is. It's season 1 episode where he's doing all this. It's like almost finished, and he does this beautiful letterhead for the word "the," and then he has nothing else, and he kept putting it off. It kind of gave me that type of energy where Neil fell asleep, woke up, and it's like, wait, I did absolutely nothing. And then he goes to sleep and he sees someone typing on the computer, which we see that's the same person. Well, look, at least aesthetically speaking, it seems like it might be the same person who grabbed Scott. So I'm wondering, are we dealing with a time travel thing, or is this just, what is that? Because at first my mind was like, could this be a time travel thing? Could it be someone from the future coming back to the past to change things? Like, maybe it's a thing of, maybe Scott's story was playing out a certain way, and it's like, well, we got to start this over. This all started here when he went up against Matthew, and maybe things changed. So it's like, right, we're going to pretend like Scott died for the sake of preparing him for what's to come because we have to change the future. That could end up being the thing, but who knows? Because I'm curious to see how people feel about this, because this is the second episode in a row with no Scott. It's kind of like episode 2, where episode 2 had a single line of dialogue from Scott. You get young Scott, who apparently based on the end was it's voiced by Finn Wolfhard, which I was like, oh, it's teen Scott Pilgrim. But either way, you get a little bit of Scott from the past, but not present day Scott. So you're getting a little Scott sprinkled in there, but it's still 2 episodes where Scott's still dead. So I'm curious how people are going to feel about that. Once again, having read the comic book, I'm curious if I feel like it's probably a thing of, no, you follow Scott all the way through the story, so this is probably a big departure from the comic, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's like, why would that person come back to help young Neil? Because he looks and he sees an entire script written. Not unless the person that helped him, not unless, like I said, not unless it is a time travel thing we're dealing with, not unless that's young Neil from the future helping himself out, as well as trying to help out Scott. It's like, where did you take Scott then? Because Ramona, because of her dream, decided to look at the security footage from that night, and it turns out Scott didn't die. Someone took him and faked his death. But it's like, why would they take him, and who would do it, and who would have the motive? And so obviously Ramona is going to have to look through a list of suspects. I love that she went to Julie for help first. I'd actually completely forgotten until they brought it up this episode when Julie's cursing, but she got censored. I'm sure once again, I'm curious if that's very, very true to the comics. But even then, it's not just her. We see other people censored too. Roxy gets censored at one point in time, and so does Stacy. At first I was like, could it be a proximity thing? But then when Roxy got censored, she's nowhere near Julie. So it's like, oh, because I remember that bit. I forgot that was it wasn't until I saw this, I was like, right, completely forgot that's a bit in the movie where she curses, and even Scott's like, how'd you do that with your mouth? She's like, don't worry about it. Once again, just one of those things, even he was caught off guard, but it's don't even worry about it. So I just thought that was interesting. I feel like we only saw, and once again, to my recollection from the limited, I remember, because I don't remember the full movie, but I'm like, I feel like we didn't get much. Once again, it's a large supporting cast, and not all of them going to have time to shine. But I don't feel like we saw Julie that often. She was very the only other times I remember Julie is fairly early on in the movie with that, and then also later on with Todd and Envy. That's the only other time later in the movie I remember Julie being there. But maybe she was in the other spots. But those are the only distinct points I remember Julie being in the movie. Like I said, it's a lot of cast of characters, a lot of exits you have to get through and stuff like that. So but I love that Wallace showed up, and it's like, oh, Scott's not dead. Well, tell him I got the locks changed, and if you see me again, remind me to change the locks. It's like, oh, so you're done playing sugar daddy. He's like, yeah, for Scott, absolutely. Now for other people, and he's getting so close to a guy, I was like, oh wow. the sexual tension and energy in this show. But yeah. Also, the fact is Julie and Steven used to date. I was like, I feel like I don't remember that detail at all. Once again, it's probably subplot things that you just don't get time to explore in a movie. So I was like, that's interesting. Like, there's a lot of overlap in some of these characters of, like, who dated who. Because, obviously, I knew about Kim. I mean, obviously, they remind you in the movie. I mean, in the first episode about, like, right, Kim being his ex. But, obviously, that was something that was only minorly explored in the movie. And it was just kind of, like, to my knowledge, it was like, my only remembrance of that. Well, no, because I forgot it does come up, like, twice. Once is because, like, it's like, no, it's fine, like, Kim's totally over it, and Scott turns, and Kim's just staring at him. But I think, if I remember correctly, I think he does apologize to her near the end of the movie. I think that's, like, after, like, yeah, he like, made up to her, like, before the final battle against Gideon. I think he apologized to her about everything, because he just kind of let it. He's not the biggest on confrontation. That's why he hasn't, like, never officially broke things off with knives. He kind of just, like, danced around it. Because we actually don't know why him and Kim broke up, only just that they did. Which, getting the insight we did was kind of interesting. Because, I mean, first and foremost, like, she's around all these women in his life. It's got to complicate things. It's like, well, obviously there's the whole envy thing, being the ex. But also, like, Knives is picking up the bass, and her and Kim actually had this really dope musical moment. It was actually really cool and cute, and obviously how it, like, animated and formed a heart. It was like they were, like, in a jam session, and even Steven's like, yo, have you ever thought about, like, kicking it with our bands? Like, how long have you playing bass? Because she was looking at a book for beginners, and she'd only been doing it for 4 hours, and seems like she's got some real talent there. So, but Kim shows up at the video store and runs into Ramona, who's trying to ask her for questions. But yeah, they started dating when they were like 14. They were just friends, and then they became more. And it's like, yeah, Scott saved me when the people from a rival school ended up kidnapping me, and he beat them all up, which is like, once again, just exploring more and more of, like, yeah, Scott, once again, feeling that anime thing of, like, yeah, like going to a rival school and just beating people up. Like, once again, it's just that video gameness, as well as just the absurdity in a very anime style of, yeah. And then I don't know if it's a thing of, like, Scott moved away or what. Like, I don't, like, not unless I remember, I didn't feel like they really explored why they broke up, but just that they did. And it's like, yeah, we're friends, but even that's complicated, because it's like, it kind of ended terribly. And it's like, oh, you're into Scott. And it's like, oh boy, like, maybe it's one of your exes that has something to do with it. And lo and behold, Roxy shows up. Maybe Roxy had the whole sword thing. She definitely didn't have the demon mask thing in the movie, but maybe when I'm thinking of her having a hammer, maybe I'm thinking of Ramona having the hammer. Maybe that's what I'm confused. Because I don't remember her doing the whole sword thing. Like, I distinctly don't remember the demon mask, because that didn't happen. But, yeah, just once again, Ramona not, explaining everything. She's just like, oh yeah, we were roommates. And it's like, no, we were more than that. And it's like, I'm here to get you back. Because she kind of went her own way from the evil exes. It's like, yeah, let them do their thing. I've got my thing. I'm gonna get you back, Ramona. First, I'm gonna fight you. I love that whole sequence, especially when, like, the movie shelf fell down, and basically the entire fight is them bouncing from movie to movie. And even at one point, you have the lady who runs the place, Kim's boss, being like, oh my god, they're ruining my movie. I was like, that's so trippy and fun, and so that's such a dope aesthetic of them, like, bouncing between movies. Like, even to the point that, like, Kim was able to kind of rewind the movie and kind of pause and kind of give Ramona the upper hand, and she was able to, like, swing, literally breaking her through maybe about 4 walls, and, I think she ended up snapping back to reality, but then they ended, like, tussling and going from movie to movie to movie. And then we kind of get into it a little bit about, because for Roxy, it's like, all I ever wanted was for you to see me. Like, you just kind of left without a single word. And Ramona, could we see, I don't know if, like, that was her just moving on with a new person, because she was talking to someone, and she kept looking back at Roxy, and Roxy was just looking so disheartened. But Ramona, I think it's just a thing of, maybe it's just, she was saying, like, right, I was afraid to face you. Like, tell her, I guess, like, much like Scott's not really good at confrontation, I think Ramona's not good at it either. of like being able to tell someone like, hey, I don't think this is working out because I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to break your heart. And so she just kind of left without saying a word, not realizing how much animosity that Roxy's been holding on to this entire time. They actually had this really like dope anime moment. It's so anime of like, right, they're falling through the sky, then they transition into like another, like maybe another movie or whatever. But like they're falling through the sky and Roxy kind of gets knocked out. And what does Ramona do? She like kind of like goes up to her and they're floating in midair and grabs her hand. I'm like, this is the most anime thing ever. I mean, like a lot of this hasn't already been, but it's just like, that is like you're very like, oh, falling in the air, we're falling and grabbing onto each other's hands. Like one hand in particular too. It's like, it's so anime, it's ridiculous, you know? But luckily when it's all said and done, you know, you got to give it up to Roxy being like, well, I'm like, I accept your apology. And, you know, even Ramona at the end being like, yeah, it looks like you came out on top. Looks like you won. So it's like, oh, like, we're just going to be friends going forward. Friends with benefits? And it's like, no, that was worth a shot. It's like, hey, what about you? And Kim's like, no, I don't. And then she kind of give it a thought. It's like, all right, let's give it a try. And they kiss. And you even see like a little bit of the spit from their kiss, like slobber from their mouth. And it's like, yeah, no sparks. Yeah, it was worth a try. And she's just she's just like humming to herself and then leaves. It's like, well, it all worked out. You took a suspect off the list and you made good with one of your exes, which is, I think this is such an interesting approach because, you know, once again, just going by the movie, it's like defeated all the exes. There was no like full closure. Like I said, I think the only like relationship closures we got was like everything between Scott, Kim, and Knives. But I don't think there was any like closure. It was just like, oh, they're dead. That's just how that was handled in the movie. Because that would just be too much to try and like have this arc of like talk no jutsu, as people put it, you know. Once again, if you're unaware of what I'm referencing, like I've heard specifically Wooly, formerly of the Super Best Friends, would describe it as talk no jutsu is what Naruto does. It's like when he's fighting someone, how does he beat them? He talks to them. It's like, it's kind of like a lot of shonen protagonists kind of have talk no jutsu, but it's kind of like really a Naruto thing. So that's why I always associate it specifically like that. Wooly is who I associate the phrase talk no jutsu with, but I don't know if anyone else like kind of coined that phrase. I just specifically heard it from him from his like Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm playthroughs. But either way, tangents and all that aside. We also had this situation where Gideon shows up and apparently him and Julie know each other, which is like, she knew him as Gordon. It's like, oh my God. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of, I lost my entire empire. My billionaire friends turned on me. My millionaire friends have turned on me, turned away from me. Had to spend the rest of my money getting here to like Ontario. So just for one sympathetic face. And Julie's like, all right, come in here, get your butt in here. So like I said, I was not expecting Gideon's arc to be what it is. So for things to kind of play out this way. So it's like, where are we going with this? Because obviously the next thing we got is Lee. He's going to be the next act. So that's why I'm like, dude, this is so... Once again, it's like, I mean, it's a good thing that it's such a diversion from the movie, but I'm curious like how, like, it feels like it might even be like a major... Like I said, it feels like it might be the middle ground between the movie and the comic, where it's pulling more from the comic, but also kind of doing like the movie and doing its own thing. So it is probably like more of an amalgamation of the two and just kind of almost its own third thing, pulling aesthetically and vibe-wise and storyline-wise, probably more so from the comic. But like I said, still kind of going its own way. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like I don't know enough about everything that goes on in the comic, but for like Scott to be going last episode and this episode is kind of really interesting, and I'm just curious to see how people feel about that. It's like, where your main protagonist away, that could rub people the wrong way. They're like, right, this is supposed to be about Scott Pilgrim. You pull away from that character for too long. It's cool and everything, but that could like definitely lose you with your audience in some regard. I saw something, nothing specific, nothing spoilerish, but I saw something that made me go, like, someone was saying, I saw something in someone's review. I didn't watch it. It was like a thumbnail, and I was like, I wonder what's that in reference to? And with Scott's story being what it is, I'm like, is that what that thumbnail was in reference to? Like I said, there was no context to it. I was just like, I wonder what that means. And so maybe it has to deal with Scott's. I'm curious how much of the season he's going to be gone. And like I said, the longer he's gone, the more that's probably going to rub people the wrong way. Like I said, I'm so curious to see what ends up being like the storyline reason behind like making him disappear and even faking his death. I even love Kim is like, yeah, most likely faking his death to get away from like the fees he owes us, which is like $3,500 in like rental fees. I also love that she's the only person that totally understands Ramona's whole thing of like, oh yeah, like using the subspace in Scott's mind. It's like, why specifically his though? Like maybe, I mean, I guess his is just shortcut. Like it takes like 15 seconds to go through his. Maybe it's like a minute or two through anyone else's. So once again, why she's the woman in and or of his dreams and everything. So, but just the fact is Kim's like the only person, and even Ramona's like, yeah, you're the only person that understands it, even though it's so simple. It's like, sure, if you say so, Ramona. But either way, I'm very, very interested to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.